She was 6 years old. She was wearing her green Girl Scout t-shirt, her little blue denim shorts, and white tennis shoes. She was chasing fireflies in the dark at the edge of a parking lot while her mother sat 30 yards away watching a baseball game. And in less than 15 minutes, she was gone. Not wandered off. Not lost. Gone. Taken. By a man who had been standing in that parking lot with no shirt on at 11 o'clock at night, watching children play in the dark, next to a red truck with a camper shell that had been specifically designed to hide what was inside it. This was not random. This was not impulsive. This man had a plan. And for 29 years, he almost got away with it completely. My name is Midnight Crime 247, and what you are about to hear is one of the most gut-wrenching, maddening, and ultimately groundbreaking cold cases in American history. Morgan Nick. A little girl from Ozark, Arkansas who disappeared on June 9, 1995, and whose case just broke wide open in a way that nobody saw coming. Stay with me, because this story does not go where you think it goes. Before we go 1 second further, if you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Midnight Crime 247 covers the cases that deserve to be remembered. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear Morgan's name, and drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from. Let us build this community around stories that matter. Now, let us get into it. You need to understand who Morgan Nick actually was before you hear what happened to her, because she was not just a case file. She was a real little girl with a personality so big it did not fit inside a 6-year-old body. She was born on September 12, 1988. She was small enough that her mother, Colleen, could still carry her with one arm when she fell asleep in the car. Blonde hair. Bright blue eyes. 5 tiny silver caps on her back teeth that caught the light when she smiled, these little flashes of silver in a 6-year-old's mouth that people who knew her still remember clearly decades later. She had decided, with complete and total seriousness, that bubblegum was its own food group. Not candy. Bubblegum specifically. That was her position. She was not moving. She wanted to be a circus performer when she grew up, but also a doctor. At the same time, her mother never told her to choose one. Every night she would gather her younger siblings, Logan and baby Taran, and she would sit with them and read bedtime stories out loud, sounding out every single word slowly, carefully, like the job genuinely mattered. Because to Morgan, it did. She had picked out her own kitten. She was very proud of that. She was somebody's big sister. She was somebody's whole entire world. And on the night of June 9, 1995, she pulled on that green Girl Scout t-shirt, climbed into the car next to her mom, and was probably talking the entire drive to Alma. Colleen Nick had almost not gone that night. A close friend had invited her to a Little League baseball game at Wofford Field in Alma, Arkansas, a small town about 30 miles from their home in Ozark. Colleen did not really know Alma. She almost said no. But her friend said, "Come on, it will be fun, bring Morgan." So she did. Around 300 people were there that warm June evening. Families from Alma and surrounding towns. Packed into the bleachers under the stadium lights. The air smelled like cut grass. Fireflies were already blinking at the edges of the parking lot. Morgan watched the game the way kids do, half paying attention, half already somewhere else in her own imagination. Then she spotted 2 children she recognized playing near the parking lot. At around 10:30 that night, she turned to her mother and asked if she could go catch fireflies with them. Colleen said no. She did not know this town. It was dark. Morgan was 6 years old. But the parents sitting around her smiled and said what people in small towns always say. The kids always play out there. It is totally fine. It is Alma. Nothing ever happens here. Those 5 words. Nothing ever happens here. They would sit inside Colleen Nick's chest for the next 29 years. She looked at her daughter's face, hopeful, bright, already halfway gone in her imagination to where the fireflies were, and she said yes. For about 15 minutes, she kept one eye on the game and one eye on the small green shirt moving through the dark near the parking lot. Morgan was out there. She was fine. Everything was fine. Then the game ended. Players jogged back toward the stands. The crowd stood up and started the slow, comfortable drift toward the parking lot. Colleen looked toward the field. The two kids Morgan had been playing with were walking back. Morgan was not with them. She told herself it was nothing. Morgan had probably just wandered back already. She was probably already at the car. She was not. And in the exact moment that reality hit her body before her brain had even caught up, Colleen Nick started moving. Back across the field. Back through the crowd. Calling her daughter's name. Morgan. Morgan. The families around her kept moving, unaware. The stadium lights buzzed above. And somewhere in the grass nearby, the fireflies Morgan had gone to chase kept blinking, quiet and small and completely indifferent to what had just happened. When Colleen found the two children and grabbed them, "Where is Morgan, where is she?" they explained what they had seen. At the end of the game, all three of them had stopped near the edge of the parking lot to shake sand out of their shoes. Morgan had leaned against a parked car to do the same. The other kids finished, turned around, started walking back. Morgan was not behind them. They assumed she had gone ahead. They did not think anything of it. But then one of the children mentioned something else. Almost like an afterthought. While they were all playing, there had been a man standing near the parking lot. Not watching the game. Watching the children. At some point he had walked over and spoken to Morgan. And now Morgan was gone. Police arrived in 6 minutes. 6 minutes that were already too late. By the time the first officer stepped out of his car, that parking lot was half empty. Headlights sweeping across the grass. Families pulling out, heads down, wanting to get home. Somewhere in that confusion, a red truck had already left. And Morgan Nick had left inside it. What the children remembered about that man became the only investigative thread in the entire case. He was white. Somewhere between his mid-20s and late 30s. Around 6 feet tall. Medium to solid build. A short beard with gray coming through. A mustache. Dark hair. He looked completely ordinary. Which made him more frightening, not less. He had no shirt on. Shirtless in a public parking lot at nearly 11 o'clock at night, watching children chase fireflies. One of the children described him to investigators using one single word. Creepy. A child's word. But precise. And investigators kept coming back to that truck. Red. Old. A mid-1980s pickup with paint faded by years of Arkansas sun. On the back, a white camper shell, but here is the thing that set off alarm bells in every investigator who heard it. The shell was too short. 4 to 5 inches too short for the truck bed it was sitting on. Slightly crooked. Like it had been taken off a completely different vehicle and placed there on purpose. Think about what that means. A camper shell that size is fully enclosed. No windows on the sides. A door at the back that latches from the outside. Dark inside. It could hold a child without anyone hearing a sound. This was not a fisherman's truck. This was a vehicle that had been modified to conceal. By morning, the search had swallowed the entire region. The FBI and Arkansas State Police arrived. Helicopters swept low over the fields outside Alma. Search dogs worked outward from the parking lot in slow grids, using Morgan's belongings to hold the scent. Hundreds of volunteers showed up without anyone asking them to, neighbors, strangers, people who had simply seen the news and driven to Alma because sitting at home felt like giving up. And through both towns, something quiet and heartbreaking began to appear. Pink ribbons tied to tree trunks, knotted to mailboxes, looped around light poles along every street in Alma and in Ozark where Morgan lived. Pink, because it was her favorite color. People wore them pinned to their shirts. Entire streets lined with them. A wordless, collective refusal to forget. Colleen Nick refused to go home that first night. She stayed at the fire station, unwilling to be anywhere that was not close to the last place her daughter had been seen. Within 3 days, 2 more reports came in from western Arkansas that made investigators go cold in their seats. In one town, a man in a red pickup tried to coax a 4-year-old girl toward him. He drove off the moment the child's mother walked out. In another town, a man matching the exact same description was reported for another suspicious interaction with a young girl. She ran. Same build. Same truck. Same deliberate behavior. This was not impulsive. This was a pattern. Over the weeks and months that followed, tips came in by the hundreds and then by the thousands. The total number of leads worked in the Morgan Nick case would eventually cross 10,000. Every red pickup truck in the region was checked. Nearly 250 sightings were reported across Arkansas and neighboring states. Every single one was followed up. Every single one hit a wall. The composite sketch ran on national television, America's Most Wanted, Unsolved Mysteries. Thousands of calls flooded the tip lines. 0 arrests. 0 charges. 0 answers. Then about 2 weeks after Morgan vanished, a call came in from Stuttgart, a town nearly 3 hours from Alma. A man claimed he had seen an intruder near his property who fled and had a little girl with him, holding her hand. He looked at the composite sketch. "That's him," he said. Police moved immediately. A 10-square-mile search zone was locked down. Officers on foot. Helicopters back in the air. Dogs brought in. And Colleen Nick got in her car and drove. Because when someone tells you your daughter might be 3 hours away, you do not wait. You go. She arrived. She waited. 16 hours she stood in Stuttgart while officers worked every street, every yard, every field in that zone. They found nothing. Then the witness sat back down with investigators, and his story shifted. Small changes at first, then larger ones. 2 polygraphs. Both returned the same result. Deception indicated. He had invented the girl entirely. He was arrested for filing a false report. 16 hours. A full police operation. And Colleen Nick drove home with nothing but silence and 3 more hours of road. After Stuttgart, the investigation settled into something worse than chaos. Quiet. Tips slowed. Physical evidence was non-existent. The red truck remained a ghost. And then, without any warning at all, a man walked into a police station and sat down across from an investigator. He was 36 years old. He was deaf. He spoke through an interpreter. And what he told them, calm, specific, detailed, made every officer in that room lean forward. He said he had been at Wofford Field that night. He said he had taken Morgan. He said he remembered waking the next morning with blood on his clothes, turning on the television, seeing her face, and taking those clothes outside to burn them. And then he said something that should have been a flashing red warning signal right then and there. He said, "I felt that I did it." Not "I know." Not "I remember." He felt that he did it. That single word should have changed the entire direction of that interview. But after more than a year of nothing, investigators were already moving. Search warrants were obtained within hours. 22 items removed from his home and vehicle. Everything sent to the FBI. For one brief moment, the first in over a year, it felt like the nightmare was ending. The community exhaled. People allowed themselves, carefully, to believe it might be over. Then he was released. The forensic results were not back yet. Without physical confirmation, there was no legal ground to hold him. The outrage was immediate. People could not understand how a man who had confessed could simply walk out of a police station. Colleen Nick watched all of it quietly. And something in her, something that operated below logic, below evidence, below anything she could explain, told her this man had not taken her daughter. She said it publicly. She said it carefully. Even if he is guilty, Morgan is not home. Stopping the search now would be the most dangerous thing anyone could do. Months later, the FBI results returned. Connected. The pink toothbrush, not Morgan's. The hair, inconclusive. The stains, not what anyone had hoped. The case against him collapsed entirely. Colleen had been right. If you are still watching at this point, drop the word "still" here in the comments right now. Let us see exactly who is following this story. Because what comes next is where this case becomes something completely different, and I need you locked in. She could have gone home after that. Close the curtains and let her grief become something private and quiet. Instead, in January of 1996, Colleen Nick stood in a room at the White House while President Clinton signed an executive order requiring missing children's photographs to be posted in federal facilities across the entire country. She had helped push for it. She had made the calls. She had told Morgan's story to the people who could make it law. Then she came home to Arkansas and built something that would outlast every dead end the investigation had produced. She closed her own business, the one she had run before June 9, 1995, before her life split cleanly into before and after. And she founded the Morgan Nick Foundation. Not a memorial. A working, active organization. One that sent trained volunteers to active search sites. Supported families in the first desperate hours of a disappearance. Worked directly alongside law enforcement. And taught children across Arkansas about personal safety, because if this had happened to her daughter, it could happen to anyone's child. That same year, Arkansas renamed its missing child alert system the Morgan Nick Amber Alert. Her daughter's name became the word that went out across the entire state every single time a child was in danger. Morgan was still missing. But her name was now actively protecting other children. A Hulu docuseries called Still Missing Morgan, produced by ABC News Studios, brought Morgan's story to a global audience, featuring exclusive interviews with the detectives and FBI agents who never stopped working the case, with Colleen at the center of all of it, refusing to let the world forget her daughter's face. The years moved forward the way they do when there is no resolution, not quickly, not cleanly, just relentlessly. Logan and Taran, the little ones Morgan used to read bedtime stories to, grew up. Built their own lives. And in every birthday photograph, every graduation, every ordinary Tuesday, there was a space where an older sister should have been standing. Morgan had stayed 6 years old while everyone around her aged. A search warrant was obtained for a property in Boonville in 2002. Cadaver dogs brought in. They dug through the night. Nothing. In November of 2010, federal investigators traveled to a vacant house in Spiro, Oklahoma, searching for DNA evidence. Nothing that moved the case forward. In December of 2017, they returned to the same Spiro property. This time the cadaver dogs alerted to a specific spot in the yard. Forensic pathologists came in and excavated the ground inch by inch, going deeper and deeper until they hit bedrock at 2 feet. No well. No evidence. No answers. The FBI released a statement saying the search had been thorough. Colleen read it and went back to work. Witness interviews from those first desperate hours in the Wofford Field parking lot. He started at page 1. And he read. And buried under 24 years of other names, other leads, and other dead ends, he stopped. There was a name. A name that had appeared in the very first weeks of the original investigation, been looked at once, set aside, and never picked up again. Billy Jack Lincks. To understand why that name deserved far more attention than it ever received, you need to understand who Billy Jack Lincks actually was. Not the version of him that answered police questions calmly in 1995. The full version. He was born and raised in Crawford County, Arkansas. He served in the United States Army. Came home, built a life, worked at Braniff Airlines in Dallas, Texas from 1962 to 1974. Steady employment. Regular paycheck. The kind of work history that makes a person look stable and unremarkable on paper. In the late 1970s, he retired and returned to Van Buren, Arkansas. Settled back into the river valley. A neighbor you would wave to. A face you recognized at the gas station. Nothing about him announced what was underneath. But in 1992, it surfaced. He had a prior criminal record involving a minor. No prison time. A suspended sentence. Court-ordered counseling. Case processed, filed away, moved on from the way the system does when someone appears to comply. He was quiet for 3 years. Then on August 29, 1995, 2 full months after Morgan Nick had vanished, he woke up and drank a fifth of rum. He drove to a Sonic drive-in on the corner of 5th and Broadway in Van Buren, 8 miles from Wofford Field. An 11-year-old girl was standing outside with her 3 brothers and a friend. Just kids on an August afternoon. Lincks pulled alongside them in his red 1986 Chevrolet pickup and started talking. The words coming out of his mouth were immediately and unmistakably wrong. He asked the girl if she wanted to talk money. She did not understand. She asked why. He told her to come closer. She did, but she asked her brothers to stay with her. Lincks looked at the boys. He reached into his pocket. 4 $1 bills, 1 for each of them. He pressed the money into their hands and told them to leave. They left. Now it was just Lincks and the girl. He made his offer. She turned and ran, screaming for her brothers and screaming for someone to call the police. Lincks hit the accelerator and left. On his way out, he clipped a telephone pole. The impact scraped a bright smear of red paint onto the pole, a detail so small and so accidental that he almost certainly never thought about it again. But it sat there on that pole. Waiting. A witness caught his license plate as the truck fled. They wrote down WJA 385. Officers ran it. No match. One investigator looked again. Looked carefully. Transposed the last 2 digits. WJA 835. That plate came back registered to a red pickup truck belonging to Billy Jack Lincks, Van Buren, Arkansas. The red paint on the pole matched his truck. He was still intoxicated when they found him. Let that sit with you for a moment. 2 digits. An 8 and a 3, written in the wrong order in a moment of confusion by one witness in a chaotic scene. That single clerical error allowed Billy Jack Lincks to remain free for months after Morgan disappeared, with the investigation still burning hot. If that plate had been written correctly the first time, investigators would have had his name, his address, and his truck within hours. Instead, a transposition error. And 24 more years of silence. Arkansas State Police and the FBI came to interview Lincks about Morgan Nick. The moment they began, he asked for a lawyer. He never said another word about Morgan Nick again. But they searched his truck. And what investigators found inside that red Chevrolet, the same year, the same model, the same color as what witnesses had described at Wofford Field on the night Morgan disappeared, was not nothing. Hair fibers on the seat and on the floorboard. Blood evidence, which was retained by the state crime lab for possible future analysis. Duct tape. A rope. A tarp folded in the truck bed large enough to cover almost anything. A sharp tool hidden inside the vehicle. And here is something that other outlets on this case have not given enough attention to. The FBI also found something else inside the truck during a later search. A blue-green cotton fiber. Found in the mat under the seats and embedded in metal pieces of the vehicle. Investigators analyzed it. And the lab technician was able to determine that it was highly unlikely that the fiber found inside the truck would come from any material other than a specific source. That fiber matched the same type of fabric as Morgan's green Girl Scout shirt. The shirt she was wearing on the night she disappeared. Think about what that means. Fiber from her shirt, inside his truck. Hair fibers. Blood. Rope. Tarp. Duct tape. And a camper shell designed to conceal. This was not a man who had wandered near a parking lot. This was a man who had come prepared. But here is where the system failed Morgan for the first time. The evidence laws that existed in Arkansas in 1995 did not require agencies to preserve all evidence from attempted kidnapping cases. That legal gap would not be closed until 2011. By then, 16 years had passed. The rope, the tarp, the tool were processed under those older laws and were not fully preserved. The blood, retained but unable to be fully tested with the technology available at the time. In 1996, Lincks was convicted for his attempted sexual solicitation of the 11-year-old girl at the Sonic Drive-In. He was sentenced to 6 years. He went to Tucker Unit Prison. He stayed quiet. He never confessed. He never gave investigators anything. He never once said Morgan's name out loud to anyone. On August 5, 2000, Billy Jack Lincks died in his prison cell. Natural causes. He was 75 years old. He had served 4 years of his 6-year sentence. He took every answer he had to his grave. No location. No confession. Just a death certificate and a closed file. The case had no suspect anymore. No one to put in a room and ask the only question that mattered. Where is she? Where did you take her? After Lincks died, that red truck passed from one owner to the next. Registered sales, each one documented, each one moving the vehicle further from his name and further from the case. It traveled Arkansas roads through summer heat and winter cold, through one decade and then the next, looking like nothing more than what it appeared to be on the outside. An old red pickup. Nothing to look twice at. But in its seams. In the fibers caught in the corners of the truck bed. In the places no eye could reach and no hand had ever reached to clean. Something microscopic remained. Something that had survived 25 years of time, new owners, different keys, and unknowing hands. And in 2019, retired Captain Brett Hartley closed that original case file, picked up the phone, and asked a question that nobody had thought to ask in 2 decades. Where is that truck right now? It was still running. Investigators traced it through the ownership chain, one recorded transfer at a time, until they found the current owner. They explained what they needed. The owner had never heard of Billy Jack Lincks. He had no idea what that truck had once carried inside it. He said yes without any hesitation. Search everything. On July 28, 2020, the FBI Evidence Response Team went through that vehicle the way you work a scene when you truly believe that something survived. They vacuumed every surface, every seam, every corner that no cleaning rag had ever reached. The seat cushions. The floorboards. The deep crevices of the truck bed where dust collects in the dark. When they finished, they had multiple vacuum canisters filled with material, including hair. The FBI took custody. In November of 2021, police publicly named Billy Jack Lincks as an official person of interest in Morgan Nick's disappearance. The FBI released a public statement that reads like a signal flare aimed at everyone who had ever crossed paths with Lincks at any point in his entire life. Whether it was through school, work, church, or any social activity, they said, we need information about Lincks and details about his entire life. Every piece of information, no detail too small or insignificant. They were building a picture of a dead man, trying to understand everywhere he had been, everyone he had known, every place he had taken that red truck. Then the science hit a wall that felt permanent. The hairs recovered from that truck had no roots. Shed naturally over time, the way hair falls out without being pulled. And in 2020, no technology on Earth could extract a usable DNA profile from rootless hair. Every lab returned the same answer. Insufficient material. Cannot be done. The canister sat in FBI custody. Through 2021. Through 2022. Into 2023. 28 years. After that parking lot. And the answer sealed inside a container, waiting for the science to catch up. Then in July of 2023, Detective Sean Taylor of the Alma Police Department read about a laboratory in the Woodlands, Texas. A company called Othram Labs. What Othram had developed was something called forensic-grade genome sequencing. A technology so precise and so sensitive that it could build a complete DNA profile from hair that had no root at all, from degraded and decades-old biological material that every other lab in the country had already given up on. They had succeeded in other cold cases where everything else had failed. Taylor called them. Then he called the FBI. By December of 2023, the vacuumed evidence left FBI custody and arrived at Othram's laboratory in Texas. The Arkansas State Police provided the funding. And then the waiting began again. 9 months. 9 months of Taylor working other cases. 9 months of Colleen continuing to run the Morgan Nick Foundation, showing up for other families with missing children the way she had never stopped showing up for her own daughter for almost 3 decades. Every morning without breaking. On September 27, 2024, the report arrived from Othram. They had successfully extracted and built a full DNA profile from one of the recovered hairs. They compared it against the reference sample that Colleen Nick had voluntarily submitted, her own DNA given so that any biological connection to her family could be confirmed or eliminated. The result, first-degree familial relationship. The hair belonged to Colleen, or one of Colleen's siblings, or one of Colleen's children. What investigators did next was quiet and methodical and absolutely devastating in its simplicity. They spent the following days interviewing every member of the Nick family. Had any of them ever met Billy Jack Lincks? Had any of them ever been near his truck? Had any of them ever set foot inside that vehicle? Every single answer came back the same way. No. Never heard of him. Never been in that truck. Colleen, never in that truck. Logan, never in that truck. Taran, never in that truck. The entire family had eliminated themselves one by one. And what remained after every no, in that silence, in that room, was the only answer left standing. One person connected to Colleen's DNA had been inside Billy Jack Lincks' truck. She had been 6 years old. On October 1, 2024, Alma Police Chief Jeff Pointer stood at a podium inside the Alma Police Department. Journalists, state officials, FBI agents, and the Nick family sat in a room with the particular stillness of people who have been waiting a very long time. He laid out everything methodically. The truck. The FBI search in 2020. The vacuum canisters. Othram Labs. The 9 months of waiting. The report. The family interviews. The eliminations. And then he said it. For the first time that I am aware of, I am naming Billy Jack Lincks as the primary individual of interest in this case. And then he said the sentence that matters most of all. The most important thing here is that Morgan is still missing. Colleen Nick walked to that microphone next. 29 years of choosing every single morning not to quit. 29 years of turning grief into work and work into change. She stood at that podium and spoke without trembling. He stole Morgan from me. He stole her from her dad. He stole her from Logan and Taran. She paused. Not from grief in that moment, but from certainty. But he didn't see that he could never win. Because our love for Morgan, her memory, her voice, outlasted his life. And then she said the 4 words that Colleen Nick has been saying for 30 years in one form or another. Morgan's heart shines on. Here is what is critically important to understand as of right now in 2025, the 30th anniversary of Morgan's disappearance. The case is still open and still active. Billy Jack Lincks is dead and cannot be charged. He left no confession. He left no location. He took everything he knew with him when he died in that prison cell in August of 2000. But investigators are not done. They are still working to build out the full picture of Lincks' life. Every person he knew, every place he went, every location that truck was ever driven to. Because somewhere in that information, investigators believe, is the answer to the question that remains. Where is Morgan? And the DNA technology that cracked this case open has now become a landmark moment for cold cases across the entire state of Arkansas. The Deputy Director of Scientific Operations for the Arkansas Crime Lab said it plainly. If Morgan's case happened today, with the technology that Othram Labs has developed, this case would be solved immediately. A family would not spend 30 years waiting. That is both a breakthrough and a heartbreak at the exact same time. What this case leaves behind is more than one family's grief. It forced Arkansas to change its evidence preservation laws. It put Morgan's name on every missing child alert that goes out across the state. It pushed a president to sign an executive order protecting missing children across the country. It produced a documentary that a global audience watched and felt. And it demonstrated, definitively, that DNA technology has now reached a point where even a single rootless hair, shed inside a truck over 30 years ago, can speak a name. The problem is the answer came too late to bring Lincks into a courtroom. The answer came too late to make him say where he took her. Morgan Nick was born on September 12, 1988. She would be 36 years old today. She wanted to be a circus performer and a doctor. She had 5 silver caps on her teeth and a kitten she had picked out herself and a little brother and baby sister she read bedtime stories to every single night like it was the most important job in the world. And somewhere, in a place investigators have not yet found, she is still waiting to come home. If you have any information about Morgan Nick's disappearance or about the life of Billy Jack Lincks, anyone who knew him, anywhere he lived or traveled, anything that could help investigators locate Morgan, contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Call 1-800-THE-LOST. That number is 1-800-843-5678. Every detail matters. Every memory of a man who thought he would never be caught is a piece of the map that leads back to her. If this story moved you, and I know it did, hit the like button right now because it helps this video reach people who have never heard Morgan's name before. Subscribe to Midnight Crime 247 so you never miss a case like this one. And leave a comment below. Tell me what part of this story stopped you cold. Tell me what you think justice looks like when the perpetrator is already dead. Tell me what you believe should happen next. This community keeps these stories alive, and keeping them alive is the only thing that keeps the pressure on. Morgan Nick is still missing. Her case is still open. And her mother has not stopped for a single day in 30 years. The least we can do is not look away. Midnight Crime 247 Justice for Morgan Nick the Lost.